with fighter jets, a red carpet, and an encouraging slogan about striving for peace posted on the wall. President Donald Trump welcomed his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin at the summit in Alaska on Friday. The results of the summit remained completely unclear after its sudden conclusion, but now finally details have emerged, and honestly they are shocking. So in this episode we'll go over the main takeaways from the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska. What was said, what wasn't said, and what conclusions can we focus on right now to analyze how this summit actually went? My name is Alexei Pechi. Today is August 16th. Let's go through everything step by step. But before we begin, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, leave any comment, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel. The link is in the description of this video. Let's review everything step by step. After a nearly 3-hour meeting, Trump and Putin addressed the press yesterday to report progress. However, they left the scheduled conference without detailing their accomplishments. One thing was obvious: no deal was made, and the ceasefire that Trump, according to him, wanted to establish after the end of this summit was far from reality, since he increasingly placed the burden of responsibility for making the deal on President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. Trump, messed up himself, and now he's saying, listen, it's all up to Zelensky. I wasn't able to make any deal with Putin, but we discussed a few things, and now I'll quote him further. And after that, as you know, Putin and Trump just left the stage without answering a single question from the journalists. It was an uncertain ending to a showcase summit that, despite all its ambiguity, really seemed to decisively welcome the return of dictator Putin to the diplomatic arena. Nevertheless, despite all the pomp and ceremony, signs of how difficult Trump's task would be became obvious right from the very beginning of the meeting. While the presidents greeted each other, air raid sirens were sounded on the runways and taxiways of Elmendorf Air Base in Ukraine, warning of incoming Russian missiles and drones. And all of this was a sign of Putin's intention to continue his war, even as Trump showered him sorry with attributes of respect on American soil. Meanwhile, Russian missiles and drones were flying over Ukraine. Trump and Putin both gave vague responses about the hours-long meeting. As Trump stated, we had an extremely productive meeting and many points were agreed upon. There is very little left. Some are not that important, but one is probably the most important. But we have a very good chance of reaching the goal. We haven't reached it yet, but we have a very good chance of reaching it. Well, Trump says we didn't achieve any goals at this summit, but overall the summit went great. In an interview right after the summit, Trump was asked a question by Sean Hannity from Fox News about territorial concessions that would give Russia lands it didn't previously control, as well as potential United States security guarantees for Ukraine. To which Trump replied, well, I think those are the points we negotiated on, and on which we basically reached an agreement. Ukraine has to agree to all of this. When asked what advice he would give to Zelensky, Trump replied, you need to make a deal. And, it's always clearer what a bad outcome might be before such negotiations than what a successful outcome could be. Trump, let me remind you, before this summit vowed to leave if he didn't like what Putin was saying, threatening to cut the joint press conference down to a solo appearance. And he stated that Moscow would face serious consequences if the war doesn't end after this summit. After the summit, the war continued without serious consequences. Trump says he won't impose sanctions or secondary tariffs on China and India. He says, I had a great meeting with Putin, a perfect 10. However, during the flight to Anchorage, Trump said he doesn't know what success will look like. He hinted that he'll know it when he sees it. It turned out that after the summit, success was just as hard to define as it was at the beginning of the summit. In his interview with Fox News, Trump stated that both Putin and Zelensky want him to be able to meet. And even before the summit, he stated that this would be his ultimate goal. They both want me to be there, and I will be there, he said. Trump said nothing about the prospect of a trilateral meeting at the press conference, only indicating that he would contact various people by phone whom he considered appropriate, including Zelensky, to inform them about the progress of the negotiations. However, the only upcoming meeting mentioned during the joint appearance of Trump and Putin was a possible meeting with the Russian dictator. "We will talk to you very soon and probably see each other again very soon," said Trump. "Next time in Moscow," replied Putin in English, which apparently excludes Zelensky from the discussion. Shortly after arriving in the United States, Putin's smile as he looked out of Trump's limousine window said it all. After many years of isolation in the West, he returned to the most powerful country on earth. It had been 10 years since Putin was last in America, and even longer since he was hosted in this country at a major presidential summit. After the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the Russian dictator became a pariah for many leaders, an unwelcome guest in most Western countries, and was even under the threat of an arrest warrant. To be precise, an arrest warrant had already been issued, and he was under threat of arrest by the International Criminal Court. But Alaska was a desirable place to hold the summit, partly because the United States is not a member of the International Criminal Court, and they do not recognize its jurisdiction. Accordingly, no one was going to arrest him. But Putin's isolation ended when his plane landed in Anchorage. The meeting on the red carpet, the flyover of fighter jets, and applause from the President of the United States himself made it clear that Putin had returned from this isolation. Their warm, smiling greeting was perceived by Russian propagandists as a historic handshake, even though Putin is still not welcomed in many places in Europe. The decision of Trump, who controls the world's largest economy and the most powerful armed forces. Accepting Putin does more to undermine attempts to avoid diplomatic isolation than any other leader could possibly do. This became even clearer when Putin got into Trump's armored vehicle. This is an unusual, strange gesture that seemed to instantly mark the return of the Russian dictator to global diplomacy, even without any significant progress. For him, it was a victory. Putin came out of isolation. An entire American president invites him into his car, shakes his hand, and applauds him as he walks down the airplane stairs. Trump's surprise happened right at the moment of landing. He no longer wanted to meet with Putin one-on-one, with only interpreters present. Instead, during the bilateral talks, each leader was joined by 2 aides. This was different from the situation earlier in the week when the White House said the summit would include a personal meeting format. An American official said this was done late but did not explain the reason for the change in format. Trump's one-on-one meetings with Putin during his first term were shrouded in a certain secrecy, since only a translator was present in the room. It was often unclear what exactly was being discussed, and aides sometimes found it difficult to understand whether any agreements had been reached. And so, reportedly after one of these meetings between Trump and Putin in Germany, Trump asked his translator to delete all notes and to forget entirely what the conversation was about. The addition of 2 aides, Deputy Secretary of State Mark Rubio and Special Representative Steve Witkoff, to Friday's meeting brought a certain clarity to these negotiations, which we will see in the coming days. Especially if Russia presents a version of events that differs from the United States' perspective, then of course Rubio and Witkoff will come out and explain what really happened. Nevertheless, there was one moment that only Trump and Putin can talk about. Their short ride in the presidential limousine from the runway to the building where the meeting took place. Right there in the car. There was no one with them except Secret Service agents, no advisors, no interpreters. As a result, only they know what was discussed in their short conversation. So far, it looks like Trump, I don't know why, invited Putin to America, gave him honors, pulled that balding jerk out of global isolation, and let him shine in front of the television cameras. And so far, there are no results. And now Trump says, listen, well, now Zelensky just has to sign any deal at all, because I tried so hard. Yes, I didn't make any deal, there are no agreements, nothing at all, but let Zelensky sign, let him give up the territories, and that's it. I'll put an ellipsis here. Share your opinion and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Bye, everyone.